the major averages finished the day in the red. The Dow having its worst day since July, worst day since May for the S&P. Stocks tumbled on fears of a Chinese developer, Evergrande Group, possibly defaulting on $300 billion worth of debt. For what all this means for the global economy, let's bring in World Bank President David Malpass. He joins us now for a first on CNBC interview ahead of the UNGA. It's great to have you, President Malpass. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, Sarah. Good to see you.
Well, news of the day on Evergrande. How do you think about the potential fallout of a default for one of China's biggest property developers on a debt burden of nearly $300 billion?
Sarah, you know, I'll talk a lot about the global economy. As we look at it, there's lots of fragilities. So I won't comment on one specific, but as you think about it, there's fragility in a lot of countries. There's still the vaccine shortage problem, which is huge. There's inflation, which is really hammering the poor. And so you put together all of those problems, and it's a world that's, we call it a reversal problem. That means whereas we're supposed to be going forward in terms of poverty reduction and also in terms of median income, shared prosperity for people, unfortunately, we're going backwards. And I think the world's got to look at that and say, how do we get moving forward on all of these topics?
So I get you don't want to talk about Evergrande and the Chinese property market as the head of the World Bank, David, but what about China in particular and the Chinese economy? We were already seeing hints of slowdown from some of the data around COVID and the fact that they put in place very tough measures to try to contain the spread. We've seen it in the real-time data. Now this worry. What do you see for that economy this year and next?
After COVID, China grew rapidly, so it's hard to tell whether that's a slowdown or an extended slowdown. But we work with them closely on a number of topics that are important to the whole world. One is the debt issues, where China is one of the biggest creditors in the poorest countries. There's also the vaccine issue, where they're a major provider of vaccines, but also trying to work with greater vaccine supply from all of the manufacturers around the world. And climate change, of course, is a big issue where China is the biggest greenhouse gas emissions provider. Our program in China is very oriented toward global public goods and specifically marine plastics, where China has been allowing those to flow into the rivers, and we're working to reduce that. So I really want to just emphasize there's connections all over, including through the economies that you're discussing today with financial markets.
Mentioning vaccines there, David, I wanted to ask whether you are critical personally of developed nations like the US that seem certain to roll out booster shots at a time when much of the developing world haven't received their vaccinations, or if you think that's a bit of a bogus criticism, given the amount that those same countries are doing to try and supply those emerging markets at the same time.
There's good news and bad. The good news is a huge amount of volume of production from the advanced economies. We're talking about, even by the end of this year, billions of doses. I chair a task force of the multilateral agencies where we focused on how do you get those vaccines to people that really need them in the developing world. The critical thing is for the advanced economies to fulfill the donations that they've committed to and the delivery and to accelerate the delivery schedules. We've advocated that they swap their near-term deliveries where they don't need them. The data of the task force shows that there's 2.4 billion excess doses that's going to be coming online in the advanced economies. And so the critical thing is to take the early delivery schedules and make them available to developing countries. World Bank we have programs in 55 countries to actually do the vaccinations. We can buy the vaccines, but there needs to be a releasing of the options and of the advanced purchases by the advanced economies so that they're available for the developing world.
Do you have a date? Do you have a timeline for when you expect the world to be vaccinated, to get to a place where we can actually talk about variants not forming and not spreading, and we can feel a little more relaxed about the situation? Is there a date?
Well, by the end of this year, we'd like to see 40% vaccinated. By the end of next year, 60% or even 70% vaccinated of the world. But the challenge there, Sarah, is what do you do in October of this year, in November and December? The countries need advance notice of which vaccines are going to be arriving, and that's been a big challenge. The transparency of the delivery schedules. We've called on the manufacturers to try to make that more clear. We have data on the website of the task force to try to connect those. But the reality of the situation right now is there are huge announcements of donations, but the actual deliveries into the developing world have been small so far. Only 2% are vaccinated.